Okay, welcome to today's episode of the podcast series Coaching Outdoors. I'm here today, as usual, Alex, with Anna Marie, my co-host. And today we are interviewing the wonderful Simon Hawtrey-Woore. So Simon, could I ask you to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, hi, good morning or evening, depending on what time you're listening. I'm Simon Hawtrey-Woore. I'm an outdoor executive coach. And I help my clients who really want to crack on with their life, with their business, and their professional career, but they're what I would probably call professionally lost a bit of direction. And I help them get back on that path and get some momentum in the right direction. I do all my work outside, and I find that's a really important environment, first and foremost, to get people to step outside their day-to-day. And come into the open space, no ceilings, and really see more clearly, get fresher perspectives and stronger insights. I'm based in London, but I do work all over the country, really, depending on where my clients are and the level of outdoorness that they want or I want to create with them. And right now I'm in Regent's Park, which I call my office. It's a wonderful 410 acres. It's got about 10 kilometers of paths and things, so it's perfect, and it's a good access point for a lot of clients that are based in the southeast or in London to come and work with me.
And thank you for just kind of sharing where you are at the moment. We have kind of had a bit of an effort to try and be outdoors throughout all these podcasts. Though it has to be said that today you are flying the flag. I was momentarily outdoors in Bradford and Avon in Wiltshire, though the heavens have just opened. So I have sought refuge in my camper van, and this is the first one I have actually done in the camper van. And then clearly we have got Alex up in the beautiful western part of Scotland. So what we always ask our guests at the very beginning is your earliest memory. So we would love to know what your earliest memory of being outdoors is, and what do you specifically enjoy about being outdoors?
Yeah, great question. Well, earliest memory was probably 6 or 7. I was very blessed to grow up in the Yorkshire countryside, and I spent most of my childhood up until teens before my parents moved outside. Earliest memory was probably night patrol. So I used to sneak out of the house about midnight, meet up with a friend, and then we lived opposite a churchyard. And we used to just go and run around shouldn't really have been doing it probably, but running around the churchyard at night, which was just an amazing feeling. Sort of partly scared out of our wits and partly the sort of adventure. But so that's probably earliest memory. And I was very blessed that my dad was keen on the outdoors. So I sort of followed his lead. I didn't really listen to him with all his bird watching and pointing things out, but it's amazing how that's coming back to me now when I remember things. But yeah, probably 6 or 7 night patrol outside. And sorry, what was the other question about?
So kind of like being outdoors. I love this image now. I've got of you kind of running around a churchyard in Yorkshire. It's always just fabulous just to get that kind of little sneak peek into people's childhoods and how it kind of stays with them.
Yeah.
And it's also okay. So kind of like being outdoors, like what specifically is it that you enjoy about being outside?
I think 2 things. One is sense of space, and I think even more so this year, and it's increasing. But yeah, the sense of space. The fact there's no ceilings, the big sky, everything feels in a totally different perspective. So I just love that, and I just feel this open expanse when I step outside. And the other thing is, which I've spoken a lot with, I spend a lot of time with my cousin in the Peak District, and we both feel this, which is we just feel incredibly grounded when we're in nature, and no matter what's whirling around in our lives, our relationships, in work or whatever, when we're in nature, we just feel incredibly grounded. And I'm not sure where that necessarily comes from, but I do feel just very grounded in nature, very comfortable, and very very assured, I suppose, in where I am in the world when I'm in nature.
It's really fascinating you've mentioned that, because it's a theme that's come up with a number of people we've spoken to, the idea of just loving that expanse and the size and just being surrounded, as you said, no ceilings, no walls, there's just lots of space around. and also that groundedness as well. So whether you're feeling the earth under your feet, or whether you're feeling the wind in your hair or on your skin, it's that sense of being grounded, and sort of feeling a sense of security. I think is a theme that's come out with a number of people we've spoken to. It's really fascinating. It would be great to learn a bit more about how your love for the outdoors, and your sort of childhood, your affinity to nature, has turned itself into you being an outdoor coach and actually having a business in the great outdoors. What's your backstory? How did you transition into the world of outdoor coaching?
Yeah, I suppose it's my backstory is sort of woven into the work I do now, really, which is so I sort of spent my whole childhood outdoors, played a lot of sport outside. I then, probably fear, ego, other things drove me into marketing. So I had a quite a long career in marketing. Looking back on it now, so there's a lot of commonality in going deeper, asking questions, getting insights, going for authenticity in marketing was the same. And I think my ability to do that and join the dots. So I drifted away from my path, I suppose, in chasing a lot of things. And then in about 99, some friends were trekking in South America, and I jumped on a sort of 2 or 3 weeks with them and did the Inca Trail. And that's where I really started to reflect on getting back to who I really was and how important nature was. And so I started training as a coach, realized that I was more interested in people than brands. And then my sort of curious mind that worked in brands worked with people. But even at that stage, I was still indoors, I suppose, with it, holding it a bit too tightly. And then I had an opportunity to start taking groups up in the Lake District and trying to merge coaching and the outdoors. Less about sort of team building, and I think someone once said to me, building a rope bridge to nowhere. I was much more interested in sort of purposeful outdoor activities where there was a goal, a sense of achievement of climbing something, but also the coaching within that. But increasingly, more and more of my clients were in London. I was picking venues, trying to take them outside their environment, and doing some of them in parks and in the outdoors. But there's always a little bit of something in the back of my mind, possibly to do with the weather, possibly to do with would they think it was a bit odd doing it. So I only sort of half went into it, and then a real I think it must have been 2014, 2015. I met Karen, I think, who you know, and she was a real tipping point for me in doing it all outside and making the decision really that come what may, I'm an outdoor coach, and that was quite transformative for me in terms of reconnecting me with my love of outdoors and where I'm at my best, where I feel most energy, but also sort of really taking it on as a office and a way of working, to be outside. And it's really seeing her and being inspired by her and the courage she had just to be outside, and no matter what, really pushed me to do that. And I've never looked back really, and just could every day see the benefits and the powers of working outside.
And thank you for being so open and honest in your journey about actually building up the courage to take the step. And it has been a contrast between some of the coaches that we've talked to in this podcast series about how some people are just adamant from the offset that that's what they're doing and off they go. And then for other people, it can take a little bit more time, and it kind of take time to emerge. I know for me, although I loved being outdoors, and that was part of why I was in the military, when I actually kind of, set up my coaching business, I was very much drawn back to that corporate, what it should be like inside, what should I look like, what should I be wearing, and actually then taking that step and kind of heading outdoors was a big thing for me to build up the courage. So thank you for kind of echoing your thoughts with that. And we always ask our interviewees to kind of pick a couple of topics, what we're going to dive into, and we've got particularly juicy ones with you, and this one kind of starts off linking to this, the wider system. What permission do we have to be outside, or what permission do we give ourselves to be outside? and how are we influenced from a, you know, a cultural perspective and a societal perspective. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts around, you know, how have we been programmed from this cultural perspective?
Yeah, so it's I mean, I love this topic, and it sort of comes up in micro areas and macros, I suppose. But I think it gets overlooked. And when I look at being outside, the benefits of outside, particularly with a coaching point of view, it's a lot of telling, I suppose. And I don't think some of the root causes are really there. And I think there's two forms of it culturally. One is just for us generally. That permission to be outside, and I see it and I pick it up with my clients and with other people, that it's something you do at the weekend. It's a leisure thing. And living in London is one of the greenest cities in the world. It's got numerous parks, and I'm just amazed how few of my clients or people I meet access the parks, either as they cut through to the office or at lunchtime. And when I've spoken to them, I get this feeling of permission that coming to have a session with me outside gives them that permission. So I've had some of them reflecting on in the workplace when they're saying where they're going, it's okay because it's a coaching session, and it wouldn't necessarily be okay to go for a walk. I had an extreme case with an organisation, I won't name them, but they specialise in encouraging and supporting outdoor activity. And they're based in a beautiful parkland, and even in an organisation like that, there was a real underlying concern with a number of the employees that they wouldn't be seen to be good to be wandering around the park at lunchtime. So I'm always really curious about what that's about and the permission. I think part of it I sense is must come from childhood, and how school, parents, everything was you can go out and play once you've done your homework, or the way playing was seen as a treat or something you did, rather than integrated. I think it's getting integrated much more, the outdoors, in education now. But certainly in my experience, it was something that was a treat. I mean, as a young kid, I had to sneak out at midnight in the dark. I wasn't locked up all the time, but yeah, it's finding opportunities. So I think that's one with permission. And I think the other one is a cultural one. I think we're not a diverse country. I think we know that. Obviously, there's, and I don't mean just in terms of cultural background or colour or race. It's also age and disability. And I think it's a bigger question, and I haven't got any answers. But I do think it's really hard for minority groups to access the outside as well. Because the language around it, a lot of the language still is about fitness and exercise rather than just activity. So a lot of the language we seems to restrict us, and we just don't make it easy enough for all groups just to step outside and take a walk. And then I suppose the other area which we talked a little bit beforehand is the weather and people's perception of the weather. A little story. So I've got a daughter who's 16. She's quite severely disabled. She's mobile, loves nature, loves the outdoors, very sensory. So when it rains or it's windy or cold or whatever we might want to huddle up and do, she doesn't. She loves it. And because she's had none of what we've had about it's bad to get wet. You don't want to get too cold. All those sort of signs. You better wrap up. All that coming in, and she loves it. And I think there's a lot for all of us that, as long as we've got the right gear and we respect it, the elements are there to be enjoyed as much as the sunny days, I suppose.
There's some absolutely wonderful stuff in what you've just said there, Simon, and it would be really interesting to actually sort of pick out some of the points you've made there and go into a little bit more detail. The thing about the weather, I mean, I'm always banging on about it, and I know Anna Marie is about, being outside in the rain. I absolutely love walking in the rain. Sometimes if it's raining, I'll just go for a walk just because it's raining. And there was actually a really interesting little opinion piece in The Guardian a couple of weeks ago about people have got to learn to love the rain and get outside in the rain, because we're sort of especially in the UK, we're sort of precluding a lot of our time from being outside because it's raining. And we have this kind of inbuilt idea that it's bad to be out in the rain. I suppose when we were younger, we were told we'll catch a cold if we're out in the rain, which obviously biologically is not true. But it's a really interesting point there. And it kind of, for me, it ties in with this idea of businesses and permission. And just going back to what you were originally saying about the culture and the permission that we give ourselves, but also that the businesses are giving to people to be outside more. Are you finding that anything has changed this year, or are you finding that businesses are becoming more open to the idea of outdoor coaching or being outdoors to do any kind of business kind of development activities? Has this year with COVID and everything and working from home, has that changed things in any way, or do you see it changing things in the future?
I think so. Drawing on my experience, I think it's changed a lot for individuals. I think I've seen a lot of, I think we all have people, because the only thing they've been able to do, shopping centres are shut. So where I live, quite near Epping Forest, has been wonderful to see so many people accessing it. And going back to the sort of diversity thing, it's really shown huge parts of the population that in their local area where they can walk and do that. I'm not so sure it's had an impact on an organisational level. I think the other thing I'm hearing is that before people know it, they've spent a whole day sitting inside on Zoom. I think Zoom is a challenge for people because you can do your back-to-backs. You don't have any detox between them or downtime going to and from. One client was talking about how their client, deadlines were much shorter and sharper because they don't even have that travel time to get back to them. So I think on the one level, at a personal level, it's raised the consciousness of the power of nature and walking and made it more accessible, that you can just walk for 20 minutes around the block and what that makes you feel and sort of reset the day. I'm not so sure organizations have yet. And I think, but that's sort of linked to how organizations really approach well-being. A lot of them, I suppose, in the ones I've come across, get first mental health first aiders, tick, bring in some mindfulness classes, tick, but I'm not sure deep down there's a lot around balance, work balance, and this, there's so much evidence around the fact that you just take 20 minutes, half an hour, maybe an hour of your day walking outside, and that has a huge impact creatively and from a productivity point of view. But I think organizations, the trust of their people to do that is still a long way to go on that, sadly. And I think that's a big role for us as coaches. I think it's great what you guys are doing with these podcasts and sort of modeling the way. I think is a huge step, that the more we model the fact that it can be done, it can be woven into our day to day, and is hugely beneficial, and showing the way, I think is a big step, rather than telling, I suppose, which the government or other organisations tend to like to do. Oh, and the sun's come out. Look at that.
And this is all about, cultural shifts. It takes time. It's ultimately, these mindsets have been embedded within the population for decades, for generations, ever since we kind of moved off the land and into the cities, and these massive kind of huge global shifts. And it kind of linking back to the other kind of big area that you mentioned, which was the diversity inclusion, which has been an absolutely massive topic in 2020, Black Lives Matter, over the summer, and almost kind of holding up the mirror to ourselves as coaches and coaches within the outdoor space. I'd be kind of interested to hear what your thoughts around diversity inclusion within your clients within the outdoor space, and then within the coaching community as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really key point. I was at a conference in beginning of just before lockdown, actually, called Adventure Minds, and there was a lot of talk there, and I think it was really interesting in that room. It was all in effect white educated individuals, really, and a lot of it was talking about hard to access, hard to reach groups, And I think there's a really important point that stuck in my mind during that conference, which was it's not hard to reach groups. It's hard to access outdoors. And I think there's a lot that can be done in that space. I'm certainly not necessarily the right person to do it, but I can certainly support it in terms of understanding that culturally. I think your point, Marie, about what we're growing up with. When a lot of communities came to the UK, they didn't have the opportunities that other sections of society had to walk, to use outdoor spaces. There's a lot of fear around in some communities about being outside. I think it's being aware of all these factors. And so I suppose as coaches, it goes back to my other point about the opportunity for us to walk the talk and be that voice for making the outdoors accessible from a coaching point of view. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of telling. There's a lot of telling about how good it is and doing it. But I think we really need to understand how we can, as coaches, we help our clients in where they're trying to get to in their lives and with outdoors. And I think it's the same as coaches with the outdoor space. There's a lot we can do to help bridge that gap. I said at the start that I was brought up in the countryside. I love it. I feel very at home and grounded in it. But I'm acutely aware that a lot of my clients aren't. They don't have that same sense of groundedness because they haven't experienced it to the depth I have. And so, but therefore, I'm conscious that I can be a real gateway for my clients, and not just my clients. I think as coaches, we're sort of, a lot of us, it's our life really. And I think how we are with the outdoors, how we interact with it, I think is really important. And it's not about being sort of gung-ho, sort of heroic about it. I think there can be heroic elements to it. But I think we can be very grounded and be that bridge for people to access the outdoors in a way that can be on their terms and how they want to do it. So I think as coaches, we all we can do is set the example and be really mindful that what might come second nature to us isn't necessarily for a huge amount of people. But we can go a long way to help guide them and be that guide, and not just our clients, our people around us. So yeah,
it really struck a chord with me as well around the diversity and inclusion piece. Even as coaches ourselves, the language we use to describe what we do. So I think a lot of people use the phrase walking and talking. And for me, I'm not a fan of the phrase walking and talking because it is actually exclusive to me. It can put people off potentially, or make people believe that, when you go for outdoor coaching, you have to be walking, and therefore people who maybe are less mobile, it's not something it's an option for them. What do you think we can do as coaches to sort of use the right language and encourage that diversity and inclusion through the way we actually talk about what we do, and make it as inclusive rather than exclusive to potential clients?
Yeah, I think it's really, you make a really good point, and language is key. And I think it's I've learned a lot this year with all the Black Lives Matter movement and things around the whole micro aggressions or micro comments, and just being really mindful of that. Personally, I think it's no different to how we are being as a coach, being really in tune with our clients from a very relational point of view, engaging where they are at with it, and sort of trusting and going with the flow. I mean, the one thing I do personally feel about nature is to trust it and trust the environment. And I suppose it goes back to why I coach outdoors, and I love nature and love being out of it, but it is the environment, and it's the fact that it's a different environment to the one that they're finding themselves lost in. But that doesn't have to be walking, and it doesn't have to be in a most picturesque park. But for me, it's about getting them out of one environment into the open space of the outdoors. And being mindful of our language as coaches. I'm always conscious that I get a bit giddy outside, and I love it. But clients sometimes are quite nervous about it. You know, whether it's dogs coming past or is it going to rain. So there's quite a lot that I put in store in terms of being aware of my clients and sensing where they're at, and checking in with them and understanding where they are in the space, and how much they want to walk and how much they don't. But it is also a really important point about people with disability and how being able to walk isn't always an option, but accessing nature really is, and it doesn't have to be sort of marching or getting muddy boots on and striding out. But it's huge value in being outside in a natural environment that's just massively calming, and good for the mind.
And that's what I find so expansive about Coaching Outdoors and so varied, is that it can go from literally sitting on a bench in a park, and actually there can be a lot of silence in that space, to a fairly brisk walk up, a hill somewhere. And it's that kind of the beauty of having that entire range. And it is very much about, through the onboarding process, getting to know your clients. That's what it comes down to at the heart of it, that client-centered element of it all. And then how do we constantly check in, so that actually each session we're making sure that we're really catering for the client at the heart of it all. And thinking about coaches who are keen to kind of test this out, it would be great to know what resources or suggestions you can offer, and signpost to our listeners. And then clearly we would love to know where our listeners can find you, so they can kind of reach out to you with any questions or queries that they might have.
Yeah, so resources, I mean, I think there's a huge amount out there, in terms of there's some very good courses that can, depending on what your relationship with nature is, whether you're seeing it as an environment to work in, and holding it lightly, or you want to go more into ecotherapy. So I think the important point, I wouldn't necessarily recommend a source, just because for me it has to really fit with who you are and your connection with nature. I think that's really key. I think one of the key things for me in my work is, and my clients pick up on, is how I am in nature and how I relate to it. So I think it's finding a way to relate to it, and you can only do that by trying. Be brave, be courageous, and try it out. And I think if you're going to try it out, definitely pick somewhere that you know really well, and has options, and you know the environment. I think that's a key thing. I think the other thing would be join a community like the one you've been talking about. I think there's huge amount we can learn. So I've been coaching outdoors, I don't know, probably on and off 10 years, but in earnest for 5 or 6. And I did a course recently on Nature Co-Facilitator. It was very good, and with a lot of people on the course that it was their first time stepping outside, and I learned a huge amount just from others, really. I have a few coaching buddies like Karen, that you guys know, and we share a lot about different ways, just checking in, different ways, different opportunities, better ways of contracting, better ways of using it, how we can introduce metaphor and things like that. But I think the best way to start really is how to understand how you are in nature and how you really want to use it in your practice, and to feel like that, because that's probably the most important thing, that it is a space and an environment that you're working in, and you want to optimize that space with your clients. So you've got to feel comfortable in that one and aligned to it, to be in there. There's a very good there's a thing called Finding Nature, that's and I could give you guys the link if you want to share it. And it's a professor, and he just pulls an amazing amount of research and insight and data around this whole area, and huge amount of information. So it's really good just to scroll through that and pick up bits about, if you're wanting to support evidence for why you're doing it or what you're doing it with your clients. that would be it. And then there was a couple of other questions. Was there? One was find me.
Where can we find you?
Yeah, you find me.
That's like an important one.
Of course it is. Yeah. So you'll see my name on hopefully on this recording. So get rid of the dash, bunch it all up, and put .com on the end, and that's my website, Hawtrey-Woore.com. Or another place to see me is on Instagram, shwoore @shwoore, and a lot of my nature stories are on Instagram, where I there's a lovely narrative from March to August. I was in Epping Forest during lockdown with my daughter, which was a lovely time with that and getting to know nature. So you can find me on Instagram and follow me outside there, or on my website. And the last thing, just one tip I would say, and I probably would say this because I enjoy taking photographs of Instagram, but taking photographs is a really good way of connecting with nature and seeing the detail when you're out and about. I've heard from a number of sources, and I know from myself, that when you're looking at nature and you're looking at the macro and the micro side of it, taking pictures and stuff can really help you create that and connection with nature, if that's your thing.
Perfect. Thank you so much for such a comprehensive list there. I love the way that you really brought it back to the individual, back to the coach. Actually, okay, so within all the resources, bring it back to yourself and place yourself at the center and have a really good kind of inner reflection of what nature means to you, and then go off. As it said, there are so many different ways that you can use nature, and bringing it back to you as a coach and how you operate really is a great starting point. So thank you so much for coming on and touching on some subjects that these are slightly different from some of the other conversations that we've been having, and we really want to be kind of showcasing these different elements of coaching and kind of having the conversations that often aren't talked about because there aren't simple answers, and sometimes they can be kind of quite easy to shy away from. And yes, we may not have all the answers, but at least we're starting to explore them. So really thank you for kind of bringing these kind of front stage and giving us all something to kind of think about, and I'm sure our listeners will have a lot of areas for reflection to kind of where they want to go with their practice. Thank you so much for giving up your time and supporting our podcast, and we would love to have you back on again in the future, and we're really keen to kind of get people on again so we can kind of go deeper, and that is what it is all about. So we'd just like to draw attention to our website itself, which is coaching-outdoors.com. That's coaching-outdoors.com, where you'll probably have been listening to this podcast anyway, but there'll be lots more for you to choose from as well.
So we'd just like to say thank you again, Simon, for joining us today. And the resources that you mentioned, we'll pop those onto our website as well in the resource section, so that people can look into those. We have some listeners who'll be really interested in the research and the stuff that you've shared there, as well as the course. Thank you very much for that. We'll pop that on our website as well. And so thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward hopefully to speaking to you again in the future.
No, thank you so much for the opportunity, and it's great that you're doing. And I think that the more coaches that can share and find their path through your inspiration, that's wonderful. And it's perfect. Sun's out, so I'm going to enjoy that. And I hope the rain stops where you are, Anna Marie, and you get to get outside, Alex.
And windy Scotland, the west coast.
Yeah.
It's actually died down a little bit now, but there's more storms on the way. So yes, but I love it. It's a very strange feeling being out in having the wind blasting from the Atlantic in your face, I have to say. But thank you very much again, and enjoy the rest of your lovely sunny day.
Will do.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.